Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. We have another great show for you today. First, new details on the Bryan Kohberger matter and my thoughts on whether Bryan Kohberger has a problem with women. An update on the Karen Reed matter. The trial begins in the case for Sean Combs' racketeering and sexual trafficking case. More videos were released in the Sheriff Mickey Stein's case. The Menendez Brothers, well, they're going to get a resentencing hearing. We have this day in legal history and our dumb criminal of the day. Let's talk about it.
All right, lawyer.
Good day, everyone. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't. Like if you do. Leave me a comment below and hit that little bell for notifications. And yes, you can check us out on any of your favorite podcasting apps. Now, before we get started, let me remind you to go to crimetalksearch.com. If there's somebody maybe coming into your life or maybe somebody not giving you that warm, fuzzy feeling, go to crimetalksearch.com, sign up for that background subscription service today. When you do, you can conduct as many background searches on anyone here in the United States as your heart desires. And once you type in the name, yes, you answer some questions, and then a report is literally generated while you wait. It is sent to you, and you can even opt in updates if new information becomes available. And in that report, you're going to get information about somebody's telephone numbers, their email addresses associated with them, the social media associated with them. You're going to find out if they have a criminal history. Are they on a sex offender registry? Are they married? Are they divorced? Do they have liens and judgments against them? Everything that you want to know about somebody that maybe you're just not comfortable asking, and guess what? They're probably not going to tell you. Go to crimetalksearch.com. You're going to be happy you did. Heck, it could possibly even save your life. All right, let's go ahead and open the record for Monday, May 12th, 2025. And first on the docket, that's right, Bryan Kohberger. Some new facts came out Friday night in the big Dateline special, as well as my thoughts. And maybe you can agree with me or disagree with me that Bryan Kohberger has some issues with women. Let me know what you think. So the recent Dateline NBC special titled The Terrible Night on King Road aired May 9th and shedding a new light on the investigation into the 2022 murders of the 4 University of Idaho students. Well, the 2-hour episode unveiled some previously unreported evidence and interviews that provided some fresh insight into the case against Bryan Kohberger, obviously the man accused of killing Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Now, the brutal stabbings, which occurred in the off-campus rental home there in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th of 2022, shocked the nation. And Kohberger, a former criminology doctoral student at Washington State University, was arrested 6 weeks later and charged with the 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. Now, a not guilty plea was entered back in May of 2023, and his trial is scheduled obviously to begin on August 11th of 2025 there in Boise, Idaho. Now, one of the most compelling pieces of new evidence presented was security footage obtained from the neighbor's home near the crime scene at 1122 King Road. The video captures a white sedan believed to be a 2011 through 2013 Hyundai Elantra circling the block multiple times in the early hours of November 13th of 2022. Investigators have long identified a white Hyundai Elantra as a critical clue, and Kohberger is known to have driven a white 2015 Elantra. The car made repeated passes by the house before pulling into what appears to be the victim's residence and then speeding away 13 minutes later. This footage is among the evidence prosecutors believe ties Kohberger to the crime scene. Some new details also came out about Kohberger's cell phone data, which the FBI has analyzed. Now, records show that Kohberger's phone connected to the cell tower within 100 meters of the King Road house 23 times over a 4-month period, all after dark, including a visit 6 days before the murders. On the night of the killings, his phone was turned off around 3 a.m., but reconnected at 4:48 a.m. south of Moscow, suggesting that he was leaving the area. Now, approximately 90 minutes later, a call was made to a number registered to his father's account. The phone data also uncovered some internet searches conducted by Kohberger in the weeks surrounding the murders. These included searches for serial killer Ted Bundy, as well as pornography related to terms such as forced, passed out, drugged, and sleeping. Additionally, his browsing history contained dozens of photos of female students from Washington State University and the University of Idaho, some of whom were close friends or social media followers of the victims. Now, a particularly notable search was for the sociopathic traits in college students, raising questions about Kohberger's own mindset. Then we have the Amazon purchase for the K-Bar. The court documents highlighted indicate that prosecutors obtained the search warrant, obviously, for Kohberger's Amazon activity, revealing that he purchased the K-Bar and a sheath some 7 months before the murders. A tan leather sheath for a K-Bar knife was found next to Madison Mogen's body at the crime scene. Now, DNA evidence linked Kohberger was recovered from that knife sheath, and it was also revealed that Kohberger returned to Amazon to view the same K-Bar knife. A detailed prosecutors argues strengthens the connection between him and the murder weapon. Then there was also a discussion that showcased the selfie taken by Kohberger on December 28th, 2022, just 2 days before his arrest, showing him wearing a black robe with a hood. The image extracted from the seized phone was described as controversial by prosecutors who released it in a court filing earlier this year. Additionally, it was reported that Kohberger made calls to a phone linked to his parents shortly before taking the selfie. Now, there were also interviews with former students, provided further context about Kohberger's behavior. A graduate student named Holly recounted meeting Kohberger at a pool party in Moscow in 2022 after exchanging numbers. She received a text from him the next day that read, "Hey, I'm pretty sure we spoke about hiking trips yesterday. I really enjoyed the activity, so please let me know. Thanks." Holly described the message as somewhat peculiar at the time and a little overly formal, noting that she did not respond. Now, another encounter involved a student who reported Kohberger volunteering to install a security camera in her apartment after a suspected break-in, raising suspicions about his intentions. Now, understand he's not charged with any of that conduct, and he's entitled to the presumption of innocence. So take a lot of this with a grain of salt. And then there's new details about the sequence of the attacks based upon sources apparently close to the investigation. Prosecutors believe that Mogen was the primary target, as the intruder went directly to her upstairs bedroom, where Gonzalez was also present. Now, Kernodle, who was awake after ordering food from DoorDash, was attacked next, followed by Chapin, who is believed to be asleep and had his lower legs carved with the blade. A surviving housemate's testimony about seeing a masked intruder with bushy eyebrows was also discussed, despite defense efforts, obviously, to suppress that description in court. Now, what I thought was interesting about the report was that they had a criminal defense attorney who is licensed in Washington State, as also does criminal defense work and death penalty work. And he basically said, the goal here is life. There's a lot of overwhelming evidence. So I think it's interesting that the people that do that type of work think the evidence is starting to stack up here a little bit. But yet some people just completely ignore the evidence and the coincidences that just keep adding up. I thought that was insightful. Obviously, if that attorney was involved in the case, he would never say something like that. But he isn't involved in the case, and he was trying to be, frankly, as practical as possible, and basically saying the best you can do is probably to get life. That will be a win for the defense. Now, obviously, Kohberger's trial is approaching, and this new evidence could obviously play a significant role in the prosecution's case. The combination of the DNA on the knife sheath, the cell phone data, surveillance footage, and the Amazon purchases records form some robust circumstantial evidence, which is viewed as the same as direct evidence. The jury will receive an instruction saying circumstantial evidence viewed as the same as direct evidence. If somebody said, yes, this is what I saw. But the jury decides what weight and credibility to give that evidence. But there's no difference. So when people say, oh, it's a circumstantial case, doesn't matter. Gets the same consideration under the law. It's what the jurors decide to do with it. Now, the defendant is obviously entitled to the presumption of innocence, and the defense has hinted that they have an alternate suspect. But as of yet, no alternate suspect given. No alibi given. They're not going to be able to provide an alibi because, well, his phone was off during the time of the alleged murders. So that would be the best alibi evidence that you could have that could be corroborated by the data. We'll leave that there. Now, obviously, if Bryan Kohberger is convicted, despite the defense trying to have him diagnosed as mentally impaired because of his autism spectrum disorder, well, we know that's not going to happen because the judge says, are you kidding me? Autism spectrum disorder level 1 is about as basic as you can get. His OCD, his ADHD, is not mentally impaired as the definition would require under the law. Basically, you have to have like under 70 IQ. Bryan Kohberger was in a PhD program, so that dog don't hunt. And then a couple of things that I've been thinking about. I think it became quite clear as this case has progressed, and I was thinking about it the other day. Clearly, Bryan Kohberger, at least in my humble opinion, has a problem with women. And I think that that's been kind of come out here, that he has a consistent problem with women, evidenced by multiple incidents across his life, with the most compelling and frequent occurrence in 2022 during his time at Washington State University, as well as leading up to the Idaho murder. These incidents include professional misconduct there at Washington State University, his termination for sexist behavior, social aggression. We have the brewery interaction, the obsessive behavior, Instagram, DMs, photo collections, and potential stalking allegations. Understand it's just an allegation. And obviously the cell phone data near the victim's home. Now, earlier incidents like the Tinder date and Career Institute reassignment suggest the issue began as early as 2015 or before, rooted in his social awkwardness and rejection sensitivity, but escalated to more overtly hostile behavior over time. Now, this pattern is clear back in 2022 when Kohberger's behavior towards women became more frequent, severe, and documented, culminating in the alleged murders of the 3 female victims there in Moscow, Idaho. Now, while the motive for the murders is not confirmed, the preponderance of female targets and the prior gender-specific behavior, I think, strongly suggests his issues with women played a role. For further clarity, let's take a look, all right? For example, we got the trial set in August, and additional evidence, digital forensics, may provide a little more insight when we actually get to the trial. But there are multiple reports and accounts suggesting that Bryan Kohberger exhibited behaviors toward women that were perceived as problematic, inappropriate, or sexist, spanning from high school years to the time as he was a graduate student. Now, these accounts come from various sources, including news outlets, interviews with individuals who knew him, and social media discussions. However, it's important to note that much of this information is based on anecdotal reports, and not all of the claims have been independently verified or substantiated with concrete evidence in the legal context. But let's go through a summary of some of the key points related to the allegations of Kohberger's problematic behavior towards women, drawn from available sources with the emphasis on distinguishing between verified evidence and unconfirmed claims. All right? Like I said, he's entitled to the presumption of innocence, but, kind of the past performance is indicative of future results, ladies and gentlemen. But let's take a look at it. First, the allegations of sexist behavior at Washington State University. He was terminated as the teaching assistant, and Kohberger was reportedly fired from this teaching assistant position in late 2022, shortly before his arrest due to complaints about his behavior towards women. Now, according to news sources, female students accused Kohberger of making them feel uncomfortable, including one claim that he followed a female student. Now, like I said, sources reported that he was rude to women, graded female students' papers more harshly, and displayed a sexist attitude towards women he interacted with in school. He was issued multiple warnings for these behaviors, and an altercation with the professor by the name of John Schneider back in September of 2022 regarding his professionalism was also noted. Now we got the investigation at Washington State. It's been investigated in Kohberger's behavior towards female students, but concluded there was no actionable wrongdoing. This suggests that while complaints were made, they may not have met the threshold for formal disciplinary action beyond his termination as a teaching assistant. Now, then you got to be a little more skeptical, but there's a Reddit thread regarding Bryan Kohberger's questioning the narrative of sexist grading, noting that some male students reported Kohberger graded the entire class harshly, not just women. However, other users cited instances of him being argumentative with female students and making condescending remarks towards a female professor, suggesting a pattern of behavior. Now, these are unverified claims from anonymous sources, so like I said, take it with a huge grain of salt. But I'm throwing this out here for discussion. Then we have other interactions with female students and staff. We have the alleged brewery incident. The owner of a brewery near Kohberger's home in Pennsylvania told people that Kohberger frequently visited alone, observed patrons, and asked female staff and customers personal questions about where they lived and who they were with. And when the women rebuffed him, he reportedly became upset, once calling a female staffer a derogatory term. The owner confronted Kohberger about his behavior, to which he responded with apparent confusion. We have the Tinder date experience. A woman named Haley Willett shared on TikTok an awkward encounter with Kohberger from 7 years prior. So we're going back to 2015 when they matched on Tinder and went on a movie date. She described him inviting himself into her apartment and touching her inappropriately, then gaslighting her by denying it. She pretended to be sick to get him to leave, citing social awkwardness rather than fear. Now, this account, while detailed, is anecdotal and unverified by, third parties. We have a pool party interaction where a female graduate student named Holly recounted an encounter with Kohberger at a 2022 pool party, describing his behavior as off and his attempts to connect as unnatural. She received this peculiar text from him about hiking that felt rehearsed and creepy, and so she ignored it. Now, this interaction, while unsettling, is in hindsight, does not indicate overt hostility, but contributes to kind of this pattern of perceived social awkwardness. And just because there's a lot of socially awkward people doesn't mean that they're all killers. I'm just throwing this out there that maybe he has problems with women, or maybe he's just socially awkward, terrified of them. Who knows? And then we have the alleged stalking and social media behavior. There's reports that indicate Kohberger followed all three females, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, and Zaina Kernodle, on Instagram and repeatedly messaged one of them who did not respond. Now, the police have somewhat come out and said there's no interaction with Kohberger and any of the victims in this particular case at all. So like I said, take that with a grain of salt. Like I said, this has also been cited as potential evidence of stalking, supported by cell phone data showing his presence near the victim's residence, at least 12 times before the murders, often late at night. Who knows? Maybe he was going to a house party. Maybe he was studying with people. This could all be absolutely innocent, ladies and gentlemen, or it could be a part of a much greater plan and scheme. Now, the affidavit for arrest warrant does not explicitly confirm stalking of a particular individual, but suggests that there was surveillance near the location of the murders. And then there's the information on the cell phone. Kohberger's phone contained a dozen of saved photos of female students from the University of Idaho and the Washington State University, many in bathing suits, some of whom were friends or followers of the victims. Now, the behaviors has been interpreted as obsessive or predatory, though it's unclear if these specific victims were targeted in these searches. Then we have some behavior going back as far as high school and earlier behavior. Apparently some bullying and awkwardness with girls. Former classmates described Kohberger as awkward with girls and bullied, particularly by female peers, for his weight. A woman by the name of Sarah Healy gave an interview which says that girls mocked him, calling him a creep or telling him to go away, which she believed contributed to some later behavior. However, others, like Casey Arntz, denied he was bullied and claimed he bullied her brother, escalating from playful teasing to aggressive behavior like putting him in a headlock. These conflicting accounts suggest complex social dynamics, but not really corroboration of murder type of stuff. And then we have Tanya Carmela Beers, a former administrator at the Monroe Career and Technical Institute in Pennsylvania, gave an interview that Kohberger was motivated from a protective service program to one without female students after two unspecified incidents involving female peers. The details of these incidents were not disclosed, limiting the weight and credibility of that particular claim. And by his senior year, Kohberger reportedly lost significant weight and became more assertive, with some describing him as a bully. A former friend noted he became creepy and militant in his veganism, which may have strained interactions with peers, including women. And the fact that 3 of the 4 victims were female, coupled with evidence suggesting Madison Mogen may have been the primary target, obviously fuels a little bit of speculation, and understand it's speculation that Kohberger's actions were motivated by animosity towards women. So you got cell phone data, security footage, the knife sheath, DNA linking him to the crime scene, but no explicit motive has been confirmed by the prosecutors. The narrative that Ethan Chapin was simply collateral damage while the female victims were targeted is based upon circumstantial evidence and obviously remains unproven. Now, there's been some online posts of Kohberger when he was a teen where he talks about feeling emotionally numb and suicidal, describing himself as sickly, tired, useless, and a stupid man. Like I said, well, not directly related to women. These posts suggest troubled mental states that could have influenced things down the road. So, like I said, anecdotal nature of these claims. Many of these allegations come from secondhand accounts, all right? Classmates, brewery staff, and lack primary documentation or legal corroboration. For example, the WSU investigation did not result in formal charges or misconduct, and the Tinder date story is a single unverified narrative from years prior. And some accounts, like those on Reddit, suggest Kohberger's harsh grading or argumentative behavior was not gender specific, challenging the narrative of targeted sexism. Similarly, conflicting high school accounts of being bullied versus being the bully obviously muddies that as well. And other theories that Kohberger, had some issues with women, we throw it out there for that discussion. Now, the legal relevance in the context of the murder case trial, character evidence like sexist behavior may be used to establish some sort of motive or pattern, but it's not direct proof of a crime. So understand that. And the prosecution's case focuses more on physical evidence, DNA, the cell phone data, the car footage, than behavioral allegation. So there is legitimate evidence, primarily in the form of consistent anecdotal reports across multiple settings, high school, college, workplace, social interactions, that Kohberger exhibited some behavior towards women that were perceived as sexist, inappropriate, or unsettling. These include, obviously, the termination, WSU, complaints from female students, creepy interactions, things of this nature. However, this evidence is largely circumstantial based on subjective accounts and not always corroborated by officials' legal findings of any kind. So take it for what it's worth. But I think it's at least worth discussing, ladies and gentlemen. Let's face it, as Freud said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and it doesn't mean anything. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So a lot of this stuff, looking back, hindsight 2020, playing armchair quarterback, you say, aha, that's weird and creepy behavior. He could just be completely socially awkward, or it could be because he's been completely rejected by women, is what it appears to be. I don't think there's any evidence that he's ever had like a long-term girlfriend, been involved in a relationship, dated a lot of women. Maybe he's either, like I said, completely intimidated by them or completely hates them. The reality of it is, most of that will probably never come into evidence, but I think you can make a straightforward argument that he's got some issues with women, at least based upon the anecdotal reports that we know about. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Next, an update on the Karen Reed trial. Well, the Massachusetts State Police Sergeant Yuri Burkinick returned to the witness stand Monday morning for more cross-examination by defense attorney Alan Jackson in the Karen Reed trial as it enters its now 4th week. This is Bukarek's 3rd day on the stand. He helped oversee the investigation into John O'Keefe's death back in 2022. So when the morning started, the judge came out. Apparently, somebody has filed 3 motions over the weekend, and the judge discussed those with counsel. No indication as to what they were. Anyway, the judge indicated that they're going to try to keep the sidebar instructions or conferences to a minimum. And of course, she thanked the jurors for their patience. Then Sergeant Bukarek was called back to the stand. Alan Jackson asked Sergeant Bukarek about a plow driver mentioning a Ford Edge in front of 34 Fairview. He asked when the plow driver said he first saw it. Bukarek said he can't remember exactly the time when the plow driver saw the vehicle in front of the home that particular morning. Now, Bukarek said he did not investigate who the Ford Edge belonged to, although said it's known that the Alberts owned a Ford Edge as well. Jackson then shifted to the Ring camera at One Meadows. Burknick testified during direct that there was no Ring video of Reed returning home. He said there was no evidence provided by Ring suggesting that Reed accessed the account, i.e. and destroyed any type of video. And after O'Keefe's phone was recovered, Burknick agreed that someone from the Massachusetts State Police opened the Ring app, but did not know who. After reviewing a report, he said that investigators accessed the Ring application. Burknick confirmed he did not take remedial action towards Proctor over the nude comment regarding Miss Reed. And Jackson asked if the nude comment was inappropriate. Burknick agreed it was unprofessional and inappropriate. And he said the text message does not show integrity or honor. He did a performance review on Mr. Proctor in October 2022. Part of his evaluation was his communication skills. Burknick said he rated him as exceptional. Jackson notes that this was after the text message chain. Court went into recess. Jackson confirmed that Burknick and Proctor interviewed Chris and Julie Albert. He also did testify before the break that Proctor mentioned that he knew the Alberts from around town, and though a friendship, they never walked into the house. Now, Burknick said he followed up with some of the questions, and Proctor said he doesn't hang out with them, and he just knows them from around town. Jackson asked Burknick if he had recovered any data from the Canton police. He said that he had, and he delivered them to Proctor. Burknick said one of the storage units had video, an external view of the police department. Jackson presented a video to the court with several different angles of the Canton Police Department on January 29th, 2022. And a Jeep with a plow is seen pulling into the lot. The vehicle is consistent with Brian Higgins' vehicle. Burknick said a person was seen exiting the Jeep and walking out of frame. Jackson continued playing the video, and another shot showing someone outside the Canton PD walking in with a hooded sweatshirt. Video shows the person going between the vehicles in the parking lot, and he was seen carrying possibly a snow broom. The Jeep left the parking lot at 1:45 a.m. Burknick said he never socialized with Brian Higgins when asked. Burknick said he was known him before the Reed case, given that he was a law enforcement officer in the area. He characterized their relationship as simply professional. Burknick agreed it appeared that Higgins was on his phone at 1:34 a.m. Burknick said he did not seek access to his phone. Court was fully dismissed after a brief voir dire hearing over what Burknick knew about the Massachusetts State Police internal affairs investigation into Mr. Proctor, so he could be questioned about it in front of the jury. Jackson asked about what he knew at the time and what he later learned about the relationship between Proctor and the Albert family. Burknick said Proctor told him he knew members of the family but didn't socialize with them and trusted that if anything, weird happened, he would have stepped in, and it didn't. As for the investigation, Burknick said other than the documents that he was attached in the text messages that was shown to him, that the investigation, nobody showed him anything of the investigation. The judge said that she wouldn't admit the line of questioning, and Jackson said he thought it was admissible, but he understood the court's ruling, and they were going to resume back later this afternoon. Now, next on the docket, Sean Combs. That's right. The high-profile sex trafficking and racketeering trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs began in Manhattan federal court after jury selection was finalized this morning. The case, which has drawn significant attention, centers on allegations of coerced sexual encounters, violence, and a decade-long pattern of criminal activity orchestrated with the help of the inner circle of employees and bodyguards of Combs. Now, prosecutors outline allegations in opening statements, and the prosecutor, Emily Johnson, painted a grim picture of Combs' alleged crimes, claiming they spanned over 20 years. Among the shocking accusations, prosecutors alleged that Combs once forced a male escort to urinate in the mouth of his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Now, Johnson emphasized that Combs did not act alone, relying on a network of loyal staff to facilitate and conceal his actions. The prosecution plans to introduce security footage from 2016, an incident there at the Los Angeles hotel, where Combs is accused of violently assaulting Ventura. Now, obviously, the defense denies these trafficking charges, and Tenny Garagos acknowledged that their client's behavior may have been indulgent and at times violent, but argued it does not constitute sexual trafficking or racketeering. Garagos described the 2016 hotel assault on Ventura as horrible dehumanizing violence, but maintained it was evidence of domestic violence, not the federal charges Combs faces. Now, the defense also contested the validity of the 2016 security footage, claiming that the version aired by CNN was edited and incomplete, though prosecutors clarified they would use unedited hotel recordings. Then we had our first witness, the trial's first witness, Israel Flores, a former hotel security guard and current Los Angeles Police Department officer, took the stand to recount the disturbing 2016 encounter. Flores described arriving at a hotel room where Ventura appeared scared and was huddled in a corner, partially covered by a hoodie. He testified that Combs, dressed only in a towel and socks, exhibited a devilish stare and later offered Flores a stack of cash to stay silent about the incident. Flores refused the money and insisted that Ventura be allowed to leave when she expressed her desire to do so. Cassie Ventura, a key figure in the case and Combs' former girlfriend, is expected to be among the early witnesses, potentially testifying as soon as today. Her testimony is anticipated to be pivotal, given her long-term relationship with Combs and the allegations of abuse central to the prosecution's case. Now, Dana Tran, the mother of Combs' 2-year-old daughter, Love Sean, made an unexpected appearance at the courthouse, arriving in a stylish all-black outfit, apparently. Combs' former partner, Miss Hilton, with whom he shares a son, was also spotted in the court, adding to the high-profile nature of the case. So what is next? Well, with witness testimonies underway, the trial is expected to go much deeper into the prosecution's allegation and the defense effort to reframe Combs' actions. The case, presided over by U.S. District Court Judge Aaron Subramanian, is likely to remain the focal point of public and media scrutiny as more of the evidence and testimony unfolds. I think it's going to be interesting, ladies and gentlemen. You know, hey, sure, he's a bad actor. Sure, he beat her up on TV, but that's not really racketeering. That's not sex, human trafficking. Somehow I think Miss Ventura is going to enlighten us as to the way things went on and the way things were. But we'll give Mr. Combs the presumption of innocence, which he is entitled to up until a jury convicts him or he were to plead guilty. We know we're at trial, so that's not going to happen. He's not going to plead guilty. Next, we have some new video in the Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins case. That's right. Sean Mickey Steins fatally shot a district court judge by the name of Kevin Mullins inside the county courthouse in an act that obviously was quite shocking to the small Kentucky community. The two men, who had been friends for over 30 years, had shared lunch just hours before the incident, and surveillance footage captured the moments leading up to the shooting and showing Steins drawing his gun as Mullins' attempt to hide behind the desk. But minutes after the shooting, the Kentucky State Police arrested Steins in the courthouse hallway, and new body cam footage revealed a paranoid Steins visibly shaken and handcuffed, expressing fear that he would be killed during transport to the county jail an hour away. He said, quote, "I leave this building, I won't draw another breath," he told the troopers, begging to be held in the nearby Letcher County Jail instead. Now, despite these reassurances from the Kentucky State Police investigators, Clayton Stamper, Steins remained convinced that someone would intercept the transport and murder him. Steins' attorneys are preparing an insanity defense, arguing that 2 weeks of intense stress compounded by a recent deposition drove him to commit the murder. Now, the deposition was part of a lawsuit filed by Sabrina Adkins, addressed allegations that a deputy sheriff sexually assaulted inmates in Mullins' chambers. Adkins also accused Mullins of engaging in sex for favor schemes, and Steins reportedly feared retaliation following his testimony, believing his wife and daughter were at risk of kidnapping or harm. Now, moments before the shooting, Steins used Mullins' phone to call his daughter and later told officers, "They're trying to kidnap my wife and kid." Anyway, the defense attorney for Steins emphasized that Steins' mental state will be central to the trial, stating that he was in fear for the safety of his wife and daughter. And I think that you'll see there is a result of that, the attorney has stated. Now, Steins obviously has pled not guilty to the murder charge. The motive behind the killing remains unclear, and the only vague explanation provided so far is what you've got. Now, the lawsuit allegations and Steins' deposition testimony are expected to play a significant role in unraveling the events that led up to that particular moment. Next on the docket, the Menendez brothers, well, they get their day in court again and again and again. Now, the long-running saga of Eric and Lyle Menendez, convicted in 1996 for the murder of their parents, takes another significant step forward next week as resentencing hearings are scheduled for May 13th and 14th in the Los Angeles County Superior Court. Now, the hearing follows years of legal battles and renewed public interest in the case, driven by modern perspectives on trauma and rehabilitation. Now, the Menendez brothers were aged 18 and 21 at the time of the 1989 killings, fatally shooting their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, in their Beverly Hills home. Now, defense attorneys have argued that the brothers acted in self-defense after enduring years of sexual abuse by their father, while prosecutors contended the motive was to secure a multi-million-dollar inheritance. The brothers were ultimately sentenced to life without parole, but recent developments have opened the door for potential freedom. Now, the judge will preside over the hearings, and it will center on whether Eric and Lyle have demonstrated sufficient rehabilitation during their 3 decades behind bars. And the defense attorneys plan to present evidence of the brothers' transformation, including their pursuit of education, participation in self-help programs, and establishment of inmate support groups. 7 family members are expected to testify in support of highlighting the brothers' efforts to give back to the prison community. Most of the extended Menendez family, except for a recently deceased uncle, have expressed forgiveness and advocate for the brothers' release. If resentenced, Eric and Lyle could become eligible for parole, and the state parole board making the final decision about their release. Now, the current prosecutor opposes any sort of resentencing, which reverses the stance of his predecessor, George Gascon, who had supported the reducing the brothers' sentence to 50 years with parole eligibility. Now, Gascon's office cited evolving understandings of sexual abuse and the brothers' rehabilitation as reasons for leniency. The current DA, however, argues that Eric and Lyle have not fully accepted responsibility for their crimes, pointing to the alleged lies during their trial. The current DA also referenced preliminary state parole board risk assessments, which reportedly flagged recent prison rule violations involving a smuggled cell phone. He argued these incidents suggest the brothers are moderately more likely to engage in violence if released. Anyway, the judge, however, downplayed the significance of the cell phone issue, noting Eric's history of similar infractions without escalation. So it wasn't violent, so therefore not a big deal. Or one could say failure to follow the rules shows that maybe you're a sociopath. Those kind of things. You can make that bold jump. I don't know. Anyway, beyond resentencing, the Menendez brothers await the outcome of the state parole board risk assessment ordered by the Governor Gavin Newsom. That final report is due by June 13th and will play a critical role in Newsom's decision on whether to grant clemency. While part of the preliminary assessment raised concerns, the attorneys emphasized that the findings are incomplete and subject to change. Now, Friday's court session was expected to address a defense motion to disqualify the current DA's office due to the alleged bias, but the Menendez brothers withdrew the request. Prosecutors' attempt to retract the resentencing petition were also rejected by the judge, ensuring that the hearing proceeds as planned. Now, obviously, the Menendez case was one of the most high-profile trials back in the 90s and remains a lightning rod for debate. Supporters argue that the brothers' actions were a desperate response to years of abuse, while critics maintain the killings were premeditated and driven by greed. As the resentencing hearing approaches, though, the outcome could redefine the brothers' future and further shape public discourse on justice, trauma, and redemption. Next on the docket, this day in legal history, on May 12th, 1917, the Espionage Act was drafted. That's right. The Justice Department was finalizing the Espionage Act enacted in June of that year to criminalize anti-war activities during World War I. Obviously, it led to over 2,000 prosecutions testing First Amendment rights. Then on this day, 1926, prohibition raids in Chicago took place. Federal agents conducted major raids on illegal distilleries in Chicago, targeting Al Capone's bootlegging operations. These raids strengthened prohibition enforcement, but exposed police corruption. And on this date, in 1970, Justice Harry Blackmun was confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. That's right, he was unanimously confirmed. You don't see that much anymore, do you, ladies and gentlemen, as a Supreme Court justice. His rulings included Roe v. Wade, which obviously shaped constitutional law and criminal justice. And finally, our dumb criminal of the day. Take a look at this video, ladies and gentlemen. An Amazon driver is seen taking a number 2 on a Los Angeles homeowner's doorsteps before urinating on another homeowner's porch moments later. That's right. She seems a little upset. The driver, who gives Amazon fresh, right, the whole new meaning when caught on camera dropping off multiple gifts on Mother's Day. Now, the lucky homeowner who got the deuce says they found a dirty paper towel in the planter's box. Now, Amazon says that the driver has since been fired, and they are deeply disturbed by the unacceptable behavior of this driver and apologize to the customers involved. But anyway, driver unidentified. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is criminal. Public urination, public deucing in public. Gross, gross, gross. You know, I get it. You got an emergency, something happens, whatever. Just to do it because you can? Ew, gross. And if it's not a crime in LA, it should be. All right, that's all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk. And remember, the Constitution matters.